So today's daf yomi that is dedicated for a Yeshua for Am Yisrael in this difficult time, Tzala for the Shvuyim, and a Shmira for the Chayalim. Today's daf yomi, we're going to start on the bottom line on Bava Metzia Lamed Bava Metzia, 200 in the bottom, that says Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Halacha Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yehuda said, in the name of Shmuel, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. What's the machokas of Rabbi Yossi? This is the machokas of Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan in a circumstance where there was a person who rented a cow, and then he lent it out, and the borrower, while the borrower had it, the cow died from an accident. So the borrower is required to pay the renter, but the renter is exempt from accidents. So the renter is not chayev to the original owner. That's the position of the Tanna Kama, where Rabbi Yossi says, how could this one be making money off the other person's cow? Rabbi Yossi says that the borrower has to pay the original owner. It says Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, the law is like Rabbi Yossi. So I'm only Rabbi Shmuel bar Yehuda or Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Yehuda, so he said to Rabbi Yehuda, Amrslan Mishmei de Shmuel, when you said to us in the name of Shmuel, that Chol Chaya Rabbi Yossi, Rishona, when you said to us in the name of Shmuel that Rabbi Yossi also argued in the first case, what's the first case? The first case is the first case of our Mishnah, where a person who was a watchman refused to take an oath to exempt himself, but then the object turns out was stolen, so he paid, and then it turns out it was stolen. So according to Tanna Kama, he's entitled to the double amount. So you said that Rabbi Yossi argues in that case. Rabbi Yossi says, no, he's not entitled to the kefal payment, that the double payment has to go back to the original owner. Halacha kamoso or ain't halacha kamoso? Is the law like Rabbi Yossi also in that first case? Because we are saying that the law is like Rabbi Yossi in this case, but it's also the law like Rabbi Yossi in the first case, that he's not entitled to the kefal payment. It goes back to the original owner. So Amar Lei Chol Kol Rabbi Yossi Afarishona Halacha kamoso Afarishona. So Rabbi Yehuda said the Rabbi Yossi argues in the first case, and the halacha is also like him in the first case. And Imar Nami Amar Rabbi Lazar Chol Kol Rabbi Yossi Afarishona Halacha kamoso Afarishona. Rabbi Yochanan says, Modai Rabbi Yossi Barishona. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says that Rabbi Yossi in the first case would agree with the Chachamim that he's entitled to the double payment. Shekvar Shilim, because he's already paid back the original owner. Mara says, wait 1 second. Rabbi Yochanan said he actually has to have paid. Shilim mean will, Shilim will, but if he hasn't paid, it doesn't go back. But then Rabbi Yochanan teach us, Shilim Mamish, he doesn't have to actually pay. El Kivan Sha'amar Hareini Mashalim. Once he says, I will pay, and Alpha Pishalo Shilim, and even though he hasn't actually paid. So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. Okay, let's say that Rabbi Yossi would admit also in the first case, once because he says, I will pay, but not that he has to have actually paid. And now we're on to the next Mishnah. Amar Lashnayim, that a man says to two people, Gazalti la'acham ikem mana. I stole $100 from one of you. I don't remember which box I took it out of. 2 boxes right next to each other. I don't know from whom. Oh, Aviv Shalacham, second case, or the father of one of them says, or he says, the father of one of you, Hivkid mana, deposited $100 of me. I don't know which father gave me the deposit. Who knows Zemana or Zemana? In this case, where he admitted it on his own, he has to pay both of them. And the Gemara is going to have to explain why our Mishnah rules that way. The third case of the Mishnah, Shaim Hevkidu Eitoach. 2 people put a deposit with one person. Zemana v'zematayim. One gave 100, one gave 200. Zelmer Shalima Saim, Zelmer Shalima Saim. Each one now claims that they gave the 200. So then the person who's watching the deposit, the shomer, knows it was Zemana. He gives each one back. V'ashar yemunach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. And the remaining 100 should be left till Elijah comes, meaning neither of them get back the remaining 100. So Rabbi Yossi argues in this case, Imkain, I'm Rabbi Yossi, Imkain, Ma'av Sidar Amai. What is the person who's lying lost? Ela koya munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. Everything has to be left until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, meaning even the 100 does not go back to them. And now a fourth case. Also, if you have two utensils, one is worth 100, one is worth 1,000. Here we go to the Chiddush, much more. It's not just where it's 100 or 200, where maybe the person who's watching it wouldn't have noticed. But of course, here he should have noticed the huge difference in the utensil. Is that each one says the better one is mine. And then under these circumstances, noticing that he gives the smaller one to one of them, and from the larger one, noticing to make katan l'sheni. He takes the larger one. Rashi says he breaks it. Maybe it's a diamond, so now it's still worth pieces, in broken pieces, and he gives that to the second person, the value of the smaller one. And the rest of the utensil, the rest of the money, basically, you leave to Eliyahu and Navi comes. I'm Rabbi Yossi again. Imkain ma'av sid ramai. What is the liar lost? Ella hakoya munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. So Rabbi Yossi says, in this case too, we leave everything until Eliyahu and Navi comes. So anyway, we go back to the first case. It says you give each one $100. Noticing what zemana was zemana. This is case number 3 of the Mishnah. Case number 1 of the Mishnah. If he says, I stole from one of you, I just don't know which one, he has to give each of them $100. So the Gemara says, we see from here, Alma misfeka knows mafkina mimona. We're going to make the guy pay. Yes, pay each one $100, but we don't know which one he stole from. So even though it's a doubt, we take away the money from him. And we don't say that if this one makes a claim from him and this one says, I don't know if it's you or your friend, I'll establish the money in the case where it is, because we don't know who's correct. We don't say that we keep the money in its established place, but we have a contradiction. But we have a contradictory source for this. And this is the case number 3 of the Mishnah. If 2 people put a deposit with one person, each one says, and one deposit was 100 and the other deposit was 200, and each one says that they had the $200 deposit. Each one claims the 200. You give each one 100, and the rest is left to Eliyahu and Navi come. So the Gemara is basically asking, what's the difference between the first case in the Mishnah and the third case in the Mishnah? The first case, we say the person who stole from both has to pay each one 100, and in this case, the person who's watching the deposit only has to give them back what's undisputed. But the disputed amount, the case that's in doubt, he leaves by him. He doesn't have to pay them back both. So, hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says there's a huge difference between the 2 cases. First case where the guy stole the money. The first case, the guy stole the money. So You're asking me a question from a case of a theft to a case of a deposit. You're asking a question from a case of a deposit where he says he keeps it with him to a case of a theft where he has to pay each one back. Gezel Davidi Surah. Gezel Davidi Surah Kansura Banan. A theft where he did something wrong, the rabbis penalized him and they said they make him they penalize him. Because of Avdi Surah deposit, he didn't do anything wrong, therefore the watchman didn't do anything wrong. Rabbis don't penalize him, and we say you just have to pay back you keep the money with you. So the Gemara says, "Rami pikadon, not pikadon, Rami gezel, gezel." So the Gemara says, let's do a contradiction between case number 1 and 2, which is theft on theft, and deposit on deposit, which is case number 3 on 4. Pikadon, not pikadon, a case of deposit on deposit, the Ketani Reisha, where it says in the first case, O Aviv Shel Echad Mihem Hifkid Etzli Mana Ve'enu Dea Ezehu Nosen Zemana was Zemana. It says in case number 2, where he says your father, it says in case number 2 was a deposit. He says one of your fathers gave me $100, and I don't know which one. He says he has to give both of them back $100. But then we go back to case number 3, where it says to put a deposit with him. Then under those circumstances, that he keeps the money with him. So Amarava, so Rava says the distinction is in the first case, it's like the deposit came to him in 2 separate times. The Havilela Medak. Rashi says, Bishnei Krichos, the Chad Gavra Hivkid Etzlo, Havile Kishnaim Shevkido, Etzlo Bishnei Krichos. That one person deposited it with him, and it was like 2 people deposited him with 2 krichos, meaning to say he did it at 2 separate times. So he should have been careful. He should have known who gave him the money. Whereas the Seifa, the latter case was that they both came to him at the same time, meaning to say that he had no way of knowing. And even though it wasn't, Rashi says, one exact bundle, since they each came on their own, they demonstrated, since they came together in the second one, they demonstrated that they weren't suspicious. They say that that their friend would make a false claim. So if they both came at the same time and deposited, how is he supposed to know? And so therefore, since he shouldn't have known better, therefore, under those circumstances, he keeps it with him. So that's what the Gemara is saying. Says Rava, he should have known because they came 2 separate times. But the Sefer in the latter case, they came to him at the same time. Then he wasn't required to check. Go like they both deposited the item with him at the same time. The Amr he could say to them, you yourselves are not careful to distinguish. Ana kapinda, you want me to make a distinction? So the Gemara says, okay, fine. So the deposit on deposit is not a question. We have a different problem. Rami gezel gezel. We have a contradiction between the theft and the theft. Here we said, here in this case, where he says, I stole from one of you, I don't know which one, he has to pay each one back the money. But we have a contradiction to that. Veramini, we have a contradiction to that. If he stole from, this is the Mishnah in Bava Kama, if he stole from one of 5 people and he doesn't know from which one he stole, this one says, Zelmer Osi Gazel, Zelmer Osi Gazel. He stole from one of 5, and each one claims that I'm the one who you stole from. He just puts the money amongst them and then he can leave. So, and this is the position of Rabbi Tarfon. So we see in the first case, he has to pay back, in the case of our Mishnah, he has to pay back each one. But in the case of Bava Kama, just drops the money amongst the 5 people and leaves. He doesn't have to pay back all of them. We see that when it's a case of a doubt, he doesn't have to spend the money. And we say we keep the money in its established place. So we see from here, there's a contradiction. Gemara says, wait 1 second. You just said that's the position of Rabbi Tarfon. Why do you say our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon? So Gemara says, why are you saying this position is Rabbi Tarfon? It's only a contradiction if you say our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why we say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon. Because from the fact that the price says about that Mishnah in the Mishnah in Yevamos, we have this Mishnah in Yevamos. That what's the it says about that price? It said that Moda Rabbi Tarfon ba'omer l'shnaim gazalti le'achem mechem mana ve'enu yedeh ezemikem shenosen lazem mana uzem mana. The reason is because there's a price that says exactly like our case, that even Rabbi Tarfon would admit, where he says, I stole from one of you, but I don't know from which one, and that you give each one 100. So clearly Rabbi Tarfon himself has this contradiction. And the case that the price there is exactly like our case. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll tell you the distinction. Hasam the Katavi way, in the case of where he stole from 5, he just doesn't know which one. They're making the claim from him. And so since they're making the claim from him, therefore, for that reason, he only has to pay back one of them. The Katavi, Hasam the Katavi way. And there they were making the claim from him. And so technically speaking, he doesn't know which one he owes, so he just puts the money down and that's it. But here, we're talking about a case where the person who is the thief wants to fulfill his spiritual obligations, his heavenly obligations. And so they say, oh, you want to fulfill your heavenly obligations, you have to pay more, you have to pay back both of them. They could not. I mean, indeed, it says, it's a katani shahodu asma. It says he himself admits it. This implies that he wants to fulfill that he did it on his own. From the fact that it says in the Mishnah that he admitted on his own, that means nobody was making the claim. So that's the reason what he wants to do. And so therefore, if you want to fulfill your heavenly obligations, you have to pay back both of them. Shema Mina. Amar Mar, so we say, Hasam, the Katavi way, but so there in the case of the Mishnah Yevamos that they made the claim from him. Vahala Matoin. And so the Gemara wants to know what itself is his claim to both of them. Meaning to say he has to put the stolen object amongst them and he leaves. So what was his claim back to them? So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Hoa Shosek, he doesn't make any claim. And Rav Masna says in the name of Rav Hoa Tzavach, that he is making Soveach, that he says to all of them, I have no idea what you're talking about. He denies it. He says, I don't know who you were. On top of one, it's not a base. Manda Amar, the one who says, Hoa Tzavach, the one who says that he's sitting there screaming at all of them. Aval shtika, but if he'll be quiet, koda. If he'll be quiet, then it's like he was admitting to them that he stole them and you have to pay back all of them. Manda Amar Ahoa Shosik, for the one who says that he's quiet, shtika da'achalav kodahu. He's not. This silence is not an admission. Matzi Amar Hai deshasa kol chad v'chad tamina dilma hayu. He says, I wasn't sure. The reason why I was quiet to each one, I knew I stole from one of them, but I don't know from which one. And so therefore, he doesn't have to pay back all of them. He just puts it down. So now we analyze a statement from the Mishnah Yevamos. So the Gemara, he puts the theft amongst them and then he leaves. The Gemara says, is he going to leave the theft amongst them and then they're going to split it? And it doesn't go, and so then it's just going to be divided 5 ways, and it's not going to be split amongst the people. That if he puts it down, you can't take it. Ideally, but if you take it, you can't return it. Maybe it's not his. And so therefore, we see in this case that something that comes to a person who doesn't know, he can't take it. And so why here do we say that there's a suffix? He put that we take it away from him, we put it down, even though it doesn't belong to him. So Amar Rav Safra, yeah, but yaniach, they don't take it, they leave it there. So that's basically that word says that he leaves. It doesn't mean, as Rashi explains, it doesn't mean that they take it and go, but rather it's going to lie there until the matter is clear. And basically he's done with the law and he puts it in front of them. And so Bezin says, okay, now we have it. You have to come and deal with it. And he actually holds on to it until Eliyahu Navi comes. So it's like, yeah, this is the disputed thing. You guys have to prove it. So now we go back to the question that Rabbi Tarfon had argued with Rabbi Akiva. So the Rabbi Tarfon said, you just put down the money and you leave, whereas Rabbi Akiva said you have to pay back each of them. Rabbi Akiva, he says, this is not the way that we take something out of sin. You have to pay back each of them. So we see, according to Rabbi Akiva, that out of a doubt, you make them pay. And we don't say that we establish the money in the hand of the person that we keep the money in its established status if it's a doubt. There are minimum, but we have a case from another Mishnah in Yevamos, a tragic case where there was a mother and a son in the same house. The mother and the son are in the same house, and they both died, but we don't know who died first. So if the son died first, then the heirs of the mother would collect the money, and if would inherit the mother who had first inherited the son. And if the mother died first, the heirs of the son would inherit the son who had first inherited the mother. So we don't know who gets the money here. So Nafa Abayis Alavali, Moyorshe ben Omrim Ha'emi. So the heirs of the son claim the mother died first, and so therefore we get all her money too. Rishona. The Yorshe Ha'em Omrim, and the heirs of the mother say Ben Meis Rishona. No, the son died first. Elu ve'elu modim sheyachoku. Both these and these admit that they split it. Rashi says this is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that they argue in other cases of where we have similar falls, that Beis Shammai says they split it, and Beis Hillel says that we leave it in their established state. But in this case, they both agree that they split it. Rabbi Akiva says, no, Modani Bazu Shanachasim B'Chazkasim. Rabbi Akiva says, in this case, I say that we leave the money in its established status. So we see from here that Rabbi Akiva doesn't say that you take the money out from somebody out of a case of a doubt. You leave it in its established status. So how do we explain the distinction of Rabbi Akiva's position? So he says, in the case of the falling, neither one has a certain claim. But in the case of the theft, that they are all claiming with certainty that he stole it from them. So it's a case. Hold on one second. It's a case of, I don't know why my camera disappeared. Okay, so it's a case of Bari V'Shema. So since they are certain, we're going to take the money away from him. So the Gemara says, but what about our case of our Mishnah? He says, L'shnaim gazalti le'achamikem mana d'shema v'shemo v'kotani nosel zem mana l'zem money. But the case of our Mishnah, he says, I stole from one of you, I don't know from who, and we make him each pay each of them $100. So the Gemara says, we might do Rabbi Akiva. But how do we know that that's the position of Rabbi Akiva? So you're saying that it's a contradiction of Rabbi Akiva. How do we know that's Rabbi Akiva? So I'll tell you how we know. The Gemara says, the Katana Dahi Moda Rabbi Tarfon. The reason why we know that's Rabbi Akiva is because we said a brayse about it. It says Rabbi Tarfon admits that Rabbi Tarfon admits in that case that he has to pay back both of them. When Man Moda, and who is Rabbi Tarfon admitting to? Rabbi Akiva Bar Puta, to Rabbi Akiva, the one who he's arguing with. That's his Bar Puta. That's the person who's arguing with in this case. Gemara says, okay, I'll answer your question this way. How do we know that this is the case of Shema the Shemahu? Mimai the Shema the Shemahu. How do we know that in this case neither one is certain? So I'll tell you how we know. So first of all, they don't make the claim against him. And secondly, each one says, I don't know. So that's how we know it's a Shema v'Shema. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll tell you what. We already said why he pays in that case. He's not paying according to the letter of the law. He's paying in that case because he wants to fulfill his spiritual obligations, not his legal obligations, his spiritual obligations. And so therefore, if he wants to fulfill his spiritual obligations, yeah, for sure he has to pay more. So remember we had said that the reason if he brings him the deposit that Rava had said on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, then the case where he says your father deposited something with me, I should have known, and then he has to pay back each of them the $100 because it was like they came at separate times, and so therefore he should have been medayik, he should have known. So says Ravina, does Rava really say this? Does Rava really say kol b'shtei krichos havleim l'meida? V'amar Rav v'tim Papa kol modim mishnayim shefkidu eitzel roa sheminiach roa b'neiim mistak. That everybody admits in a case where two people left an animal with a shepherd and he doesn't know who it is, that he just puts it among so many leaves, and we don't say the shepherd shouldn't have known. So the Gemara says, Amroy Hasim k'shefkidu be'edru shel roa shel medato. Yeah, they put there without the shepherd knowing. It's a totally different case. So there, of course, the shepherd's not supposed to know. The Gemara says also if we have two utensils, one was worth 100, one was worth 1,000. Shricha, we needed to say this case. Now, there you take why do we need both cases here? We said in the first case, if that the third case, basically this is the third case of the Mishnah. The third case of the Mishnah is each one claims that they gave the guy 200, but one of them only gave 100. So Rabbi Yossi says you don't give them anything, and Tanakh says you give them each back 100 and leave the other 100 for Eliyahu. And then it gives another case where one says they both claim they gave the utensil that was worth $1,000, but one of them had only given a utensil worth 100. Rabbi Yossi says, so the Tanakh says give each one back 100. Rabbi Yossi says no, he give them neither, because otherwise what is the liar lost? And Gemara says we needed to give us both case number 3 and 4, even though they're the same case. If we just had the first case, which was 100 and 200, in that case, we're going to have the Rabbanan say you give them each back 100. Because neither of them are losing money by giving us back the 100. That they each have their claim. But here, in order to pay them back, we have to break the utensil. Maybe we would agree with Rabbi Yossi that we don't give them back anything, because otherwise we're going to cause the person who had the large utensil to break it or lose something. Now, and if we only had the utensil case, maybe their Rabbi Yossi says we don't give them back anything because there's such a the guy is going to lose money when he breaks his utensil. But in the case of 100, so therefore it's Tzricha. Gemara says, time is Rabbi Yossi, but the reason Rabbi Yossi is Mishum Hefsed Aramai, is because we don't want the liar to gain. So what does it matter if it's a utensil or it's money? Why would you think to say that in the case of money, he would agree with the rabbis? So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. Both cases are only needed for the Rabbanan, and we're saying not only in this case, where it's 100 and 200, but even in the case where we're breaking the utensil, the Rabbanan are also going to say the same law. Okay, so we're going to stop the recording here. Obviously, we'll go over this stuff again right after davening.